Hello, Sara here. Before we get into today's episode, I am thrilled to share that our next AJFF In Conversation webinar, the final webinar of 2020, will be taking place Monday, November 9th at 7 p.m. Eastern. Our very special guest for that webinar will be Israeli Academy Award-winning director Yuval Adler, whose new film, The Secrets We Keep, is a star-studded post-World War II thriller. Film critic and previous podcast guest Jason Evans will be moderating. To watch the film on VOD and register for our webinar, please go to ajff.org/inconversation. You won't want to miss it. Thank you, and without further ado, please now enjoy this episode. Hi, I'm Sara Glassberg, and this is AJFF In Conversation, the Jewish Film Podcast. With me today is a very special guest from Howling Wolf Productions, filmmaker Aaron Wolf. Aaron is an LA-based director, writer, actor, and co-founder of Howling Wolf Productions. His narrative short film, The Walk, played at the 2015 AJFF and starred Peter Riegert as a stranger whose kindness profoundly affects a young Brooklyn boy who is grieving over the death of his father. Then, his 2017 feature documentary, Restoring Tomorrow, chronicles the restoration of Los Angeles' Wilshire Boulevard Temple and offers a hopeful tale of rebirth, reconnection, renovation, and rediscovery. Aaron toured the country with the film, and it likewise screened at AJFF, and it earned all kinds of press coverage and accolades. Now, Aaron's latest feature, Tar, is a narrative and a foray into a genre that listeners of this podcast by now know that I love dearly, horror. Aaron, thank you so much for being with me today. I want to start by asking how your filmmaking journey began. What is kind of your filmmaking origin story?
As we have put out an origin story right now in the theaters and on demand. But the Aaron origin story is very different than our movie out right now. I grew up in Los Angeles, and starting about age 7, I became infatuated, fascinated by the entertainment industry, by film and acting. And I would read Hollywood Reporter and Variety instead of children's books. That's what I'd read as my love of this world. I was acting in community theater. I started to pick up my dad's camera and make little things. So it's been in my blood for my whole life. My dad was a speechwriter in corporate Disney when I was a little older. And so I'd also go to the studio after school. He'd take me there until he could go home. And I would just wander off from the where I was supposed to be and go and do my homework or just sit and watch and talk to the people making movies and TV shows, including some of the celebrities and stuff. Because I didn't care. I didn't know any different. I was just fascinated by all of it. So I'd go up to Tom Hanks or Ellen DeGeneres and just say, "Hey, how did you do that? What was that?" As a 9-year-old. And they probably thought, "Who is this guy?" Or maybe they thought, "I don't care. I'll answer his questions." Everyone was always nice to me. So that's where it started. And then as I went through high school and stuff, I was just diving more into that whole world of making movies and creativity and my love of creativity. And it's really how my brain works. Since I have learning differences, the creative part of my brain, and I've made films about learning differences, the creative part of my brain just explodes, the visual part. And then I ended up at New York University for film and acting, and afterwards did what everyone does. I was a waiter for about 6 months, and then I got hired for my first real professional gig after college because someone saw my film in a festival. So that was how the journey sort of took off.
That's incredible. I wanted to kind of start with that question because I think there is going to be this theme of journeys, both in terms of your films and filmmaking, throughout this interview. So I'm really just thrilled to have you on and to hear how you got started. Kind of shifting gears into the films themselves, something that I'm really struck by is how different they all seem. The three films that I think we'll want to focus on today. Of course, you already referred to your latest one, which we will definitely get to. I can't wait to talk to you about your newest film personally. But, you have your short film that was a narrative, then your feature documentary, and they're just so different in form and genre. And you yourself also wore multiple hats creatively and held multiple roles within each of their productions, actor, subject, director. So I'd love to hear what that experience was like, juggling all of those, to me, seemingly disparate things. Maybe to you, they actually coalesce really nicely. I don't know. But just making each of these different films, wearing each of those different hats, and perhaps if you could also speak to whether that experience varied from film to film.
So it's a great question, because it really has varied from film to film, and I've never thought of it in the way that I understand it seems, because to me it's all storytelling, and it's what stories interest me. So and it usually comes from a place from the heart. It comes from a place from my heart, from something personal, some inkling of something personal, whether it's something that's happened to me. I mentioned learning differences, and we've done films on that. In terms of wearing different hats, I'll touch on that briefly. So I've always worn all the hats, because when you start in this world of filmmaking, you're wearing every hat. Like, who's the actor you can use for your thing? Well, me. And then who's the editor? Well, me. Like, I have to do all of it. So I never thought of it like that until college, when you start to learn a little more about the collaborative process of filmmaking and how that works. Same with community theater, you see the collaborative. But I've just always thought, like, how can I put this story together? Like, I'll give you an example of a film before these. I made a film that was in a bunch of festivals and won some awards called Chess in the City, a short documentary. I never really thought I'd be a documentary filmmaker at all, and I'm not. I don't consider myself a documentary filmmaker. I'm a filmmaker. I just make stories that interest me. I was living in New York, and I was fascinated by chess in Washington Square Park, where my college was situated around. And so, I'd play the guys in Washington Square Park, and I'd lose every time within like a minute. And I was just fascinated by this world, because I also realized there was so much connectivity between these players and the people they were playing, and with each other in the chess community in New York. And so I thought, what about a concept of something that I've been really interested in, of a city of 7 million people, and people aren't as connected as a game that's played mainly in silence between two people. So then I thought, I want to make a movie about that. So I called it Chess in the City instead of Sex in the City. And I edited it. I shot it. I did the interviews. I did the music. I did all of it, because that's what you did when I wanted to get something made. So that kind of story is what started it for me. So then when, like, you brought up The Walk, or Short, or Guest House, or the LD, a bunch of different of these other films, if I feel there's a role for me, I'll do it, because it's the easiest. If I feel I can pull it off, it's the easiest to get me rather than to find someone else. And I also love acting. It's been a passion of mine forever. So that part is just part of the storytelling. And then directing, it's the same thing. It's like, I have an idea in my head. I want to bring it to life. How can I best do it? So, and then the themes are all from the heart. Like, they're all different genres. But I don't look at myself as a genre filmmaker. I look at myself as a storyteller.
That makes a lot of sense. So at its core, even though you, like you said, consider yourself a filmmaker, not necessarily of one particular genre or form, it sounds like there's this umbrella under which you're operating, no matter what role you're kind of playing or how many roles you're playing, where you are just telling a story. And I think that's really fascinating, and it makes a lot of sense too. Like, again, we're probably going to have a conversation today of how your career has evolved and maybe what's changed or what hasn't. But I think it's really beautiful that at the core you're telling stories, and whatever hat you have to have on, it's to tell the story. So from there, and this is where I think the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival kind of is a part of this. I'm also curious about what happens as far as your role as a storyteller after you've told the story, meaning the film has been produced and it is done and it's about to go out there in the world. I would think, again, just from my perspective, I would think that the releases and the marketing for these different kinds of films would have to be different and were different. You know, the decision of theatrical release, festival circuit, VOD, some combination. Again, the way the film might be marketed, it would seem to have to be different for each of these. Is that accurate? Can you talk a little bit about the journey that one of your films would take after you have completed it?
Yeah, every single film is its own journey completely. Just like when people say, like, here's how you get a film made, I know they're lying immediately, because there is no one way to get a film made. There is no one journey. There's no one way that one film happens. In all my films, in all my work, every single one has its own completely different journey, set of problems to solve, and set of obstacles to overcome, and different ways in which it got to the screen in the first place. So they're just always different, and they're always unique, and they're always fascinating, and they're a struggle. There's highs, there's lows, there's middles, there's everything which goes with that. With some films that I've done, really the festival circuit has proven to be the circuit that matters the most, because that's the one that really gets the word out. So with the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival, for example, I've played as a Jew. I've played there a number of times with a number of our films, and it's always been a great place because it's a beautiful, wonderful put on festival that's so professional, and really one of the top-notch experiences of any festival I've had. Mm-hmm. And it's a great jumping off point because you start getting press, you start building momentum for future festivals and future release, and so on and so forth. With Restoring Tomorrow, for example, which played there, it went through a bunch of incarnations because we had like a bunch of press around it and around what I was doing with it. And then it was time to do the theatrical release. And we had a lot of options on our plate. Like, what do we do with it? So we've done some festivals, we won some awards, we've been written up in places. So now what? And then we did do a theatrical release. We were in a lot of theaters, actually, around like 500, which for a documentary is a lot. And then we got Oscar shortlisted. So then that was an interesting thing. So this journey was a very different journey than I'd ever been on with Restoring Tomorrow to then, and now it's on Amazon to watch. So it was like festivals, more festivals, then stop festivals because we wanted to make sure, okay, we're having a theatrical release, so we don't want overexposure because the exposure is going to come from the theatrical. And then once the theatrical, then it's, all right, where do you land it so people can watch it at home? So that was that journey. Now, for a short film you brought up, like for Guest House or The Walk, two ones that we made that were, they won a bunch of awards, and one of them played at the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival, The Walk. And those journeys were about getting it out there to as many festivals as possible, awards winning, things like that, and hoping people respond to it. Oh, that's another big important thing. I make a movie. It's done. I have ideas of how to market it or what to do with it. But you also have to make sure people respond to it and like it. Or at least some people like it. Because if people don't like it, then it's out of my hands. I can't tell people to like a movie that I made. So that's another big what if in this whole journey of you never know what's going to happen. It's actually a line in Restoring Tomorrow. My grandma says, you just never know, kid. You just never know. So there's all these different journeys. And then, Sarah, a big thing that happened currently with distribution was COVID. I mean, all of a sudden, we're getting ready to release our newest film, Tar, and COVID hit, a pandemic strikes. And we had a distribution company that had a plan for it to be released in May. They got bought out and went under right when so not to get into too many of the details, right when the pandemic hit, and we had to switch our whole plan up like immediately, because it was like, whoa, everything that we'd been prepping for a May release is gone. And then we had to redo it all and get a new distributor and have the release we're having now in October, November. So it really is, a lot of it's in our hands and a lot of it's out of our hands, including the marketing, because this is a collaborative industry, collaborative business. So, and collaborative creatively when you're on set and afterwards. So I can have ideas of how I want to market a movie and what I want to do with it, including with our current film, Tar. And then the studio can have a whole other way they want to market it. And so then it's push and pull there of what you do. Because we have power, but we only have so much power in terms of what we want to do with the film. So that's a bunch of different stories wrapped into one.
No, I mean, my question was kind of inherently leading to that kind of answer, because it really does sound like there's aspects to it that are kind of magical. You don't know what's going to happen. It's on the festival circuit. You see people's reactions. And then there are these other aspects you spoke to that are a little bit more fraught and unpredictable. So, and I can't even imagine how stressful to have a May release planned for a film. And to have the world turned upside down.
Yeah, there were a few sleepless nights. And one other thing I just want to say about that collaborative aspect of it, because I was talking a lot about doing everything on my own. What I also have learned I learned early on, is I'm only as good as myself, which means I'm not going to grow and get better until I allow that collaboration in, and let the set collaboration come in, and let the pre-production collaboration come in, the post-production collaboration come in. All of that is actually what makes everything so much better. I'm only as good as the people I surround myself with in every part of the journey of filmmaking and creating stories or TV shows or anything. So that was, while it's fun as a kid to do it that way, you start to learn you need your teammates, because your teammates make you better.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting. You kind of read my mind in terms of where I was going to go with some questions around your film, Restoring Tomorrow.
I'm actually on the side. I'm a mind reader. I do that. I do tarot. No, I'm just kidding. But yes. So keep going.
But it was kind of eerie, because I was kind of lining up like, okay, here's the next question I want to ask, and you sort of spoke to it already. But is there anything else that you could talk about with regard to your experience with Restoring Tomorrow? Just because that film, it's interesting you're talking about the collaborative aspects, but and that you're not again strictly a documentary filmmaker, but because this film did go so many places, and it was also such a personal story for you. And in addition, I do have a kind of an extension question on this regarding, kind of your relationship with AJFF. But if you could talk a little bit more about the AJFF experience and where and how presenting Restoring Tomorrow at AJFF might, specifically fit into your journey with the film, or, just the film's journey. I'd just love to hear a little bit more about all of that.
Yeah, Restoring Tomorrow, and so that people know, it's a movie about, I call it a 3-tiered documentary, 3 styles of documentary wrapped into one, because it's a personal story about my journey back to my place that I grew up with that was falling apart. My journey back to Judaism. My grandfather was a rabbi, escaped the Holocaust and escaped Nazi Germany, and came to the U.S. and became a rabbi at Wilshire Boulevard Temple in Los Angeles. It's then a second, so there's like a first person, a second person aspect, which is the temple. The temple was falling apart and was maybe going to be destroyed, Wilshire Boulevard Temple. So it was my personal journey learning about it. There was the second part, which is the second person, is this place going to survive? And then there's a third part that I wanted to bring into it, which was the history of Los Angeles, because the temple was founded when Los Angeles had 5,000 people, and it's been here up till now and beyond. So I found that aspect of the story to be fascinating. It's almost like I could call like for the movie Forrest Gump, where Forrest Gump is like a fly on the wall through all these parts in U.S. history, and so was the temple. And so I wanted to tell that story too. So then how do you weave all those stories in? Well, that's what we tried to do. And it's not a typical way to make a movie, make a documentary with these three stories kind of all rolled into one. And how do you connect them all at the end? So how are people going to respond to it? And they did. People responded to it and loved it. I'll always say this. It's the only movie I'll ever have on Rotten Tomatoes that's 100%. And I'm almost sure we'll never have that again. And I'm really thrilled that Restoring Tomorrow did that. Because then the journey took off. People really responded to the film and really liked it. I don't even like the word responded. That sounds stupid. People enjoyed the movie. People enjoyed the movie, connected to it, and I think found a bit of themselves in my journey and with their families. So that meant a ton to me. And then to come to the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival, really, I mean, one of the preeminent Jewish film festivals in the world, and show the film and to get the beautiful response I got there. Was on some of the TV shows and stuff, and it was just really a wonderful experience. And what you guys do and Kenny does to make that festival feel like when you arrive in Atlanta, you're immediately at home was awesome. And then seeing the response of the film, how people really reacted to it in such a beautiful way. I mean, people were taking me to different synagogues around the city. One, they took me to the temple, which is the Wilshire Boulevard Temple of Atlanta, from what I was told, which was really neat to see. And then I got that treatment after that at other places. Wherever I go, I'd be taken to places, or they'd want to show me their personal place. And it just meant the world to me that the film was connecting in a way where it made people want to show me a piece of their personal lives or their story. And it was just, I'll never forget that experience. And it continues to this day, minus the pandemic, because I still get asked to go speak around the country and outside the country. I went to New Zealand with the film. They flew me out there to speak at their big town, their center in Auckland with the film. So the idea that I'm now going and speaking about restoring places that matter, and we have a TV show we developed around it called Restoring Your Tomorrow, about making sure places that matter get restored in communities like Atlanta. We did an episode about Morris Brown College, an HBCU in Atlanta, based around restoring places that matter that are crumbling. And during COVID, that matters more than ever because so much is being destroyed. And the AJFF was a real kickoff for that, where it showed, wow, people are really responding in such a beautiful way to this film, and it means so much.
Wow, that is really, I think, a perfect set of examples, really, as to kind of the potential of a film like yours, the potential to spur other projects and have meaningful conversations and meaningful action. So it's cool to hear that AJFF was sort of, in a way, the beginning of that particular journey for the film. Something else with regard to your kind of connection to AJFF, I hope I can ask about is, I know you actually worked with us to film some sequences with the Kasdan family for our Icon Award celebration of Lawrence Kasdan a few years back as well. Is that something that you could talk a little bit more about, just what that experience was like before we get into the fun that is your new movie?
Absolutely. So that's what's cool about the journey of being a filmmaker, actor, director, whatever label you want to give, is this journey, just like with Restoring Tomorrow and going and, like, I do a lot of public speaking now I had done some, but the Restoring Tomorrow film really made it take off. People have made fundraisers around this film to restore their place that matters. It could be a church, it could be a YMCA, whatever it is, and I come speak. Or companies who want to feel hope and want to feel hope in their company. And then I go show the movie and speak about that. And so another branch of this was this experience with for the Kasdan thing. I was asked to do an interview with Kevin Kline, who is an actor I've admired growing up and love his films. And so I went to his house and did the interview, and Kenny said this to me, and maybe he was just fluffing my, trying to make me feel good, but he said that the interview I did was the best one of the bunch. And I told him it wasn't better or worse. It's just I wanted to dive into Kevin Kline, the person, not Kevin Kline, and just ask a few questions about what it was like working with Lawrence Kasdan. So Kevin and I ended up talking for like 2 hours. It was supposed to be like a 15-minute interview. We talked for 2 hours on camera, and I got to learn all about him. And so that meant a lot to me, to be able to hopefully contribute to the piece that was shown for Kasdan in a way where we got some stuff out of Kevin Kline, which is a big collaborator with Kasdan, of that you wouldn't normally hear, some more personal stuff. Because all my interviews with Restoring Tomorrow, with all our hired gigs, when we do things for hire, with our other documentaries, with everything we do, I don't call it, I'm going to interview you. I call it, let's have a conversation. Because I want to have a conversation with people, just like we're having right now, Sarah. I want to have a conversation with people so that we can connect and learn about each other and learn what's going on and what the real story is, not the talking points.
Absolutely. I am, I won't say jealous, but it was just really, now that we are, establishing that this is just a conversation rather than an interview, let me just say candidly, like, it's just cool to hear about your experience doing that. I came on board with the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival, I think the same, not professionally, but just in a volunteer capacity first. I think the same year that Restoring Tomorrow was in it. So this is just really cool for me. And kind of to segue, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. So I also, definitely wanted to ask you about the Lawrence Kasdan involvement. But I'm also a huge horror movie fan. So I will have kind of a closing question after this, but this is where I just want you to tell me everything that you can, I guess without spoilers, but just tell me all about Tar. Again, maybe before we started talking, I would have thought, oh, this seems like a little bit of a departure in certain ways, but also kind of speaks to, I think, the variety of styles and stories that, that you have been putting out there. It's just kind of fits into that lineage, that evolution. So what drew you to this genre, this story? And of course, we'll also want to make sure our audience, our listeners, know where and when and how they can go watch the movie.
Yeah, so that's funny because, again, to me, it's not a departure, even though it might seem that way. The Brea Tar Pits, which is what Tar is based on, it's based on a true Native American legend about the Brea Tar Pits and what goes on underneath when man builds, in this case, the LA subway is being built and awakens the underneath of the Brea Tar Pits. And a new a creature comes out that is not extinct underneath the Brea Tar Pits, which is a real thing in Los Angeles. It's this big pool of tar in the middle of LA. And it's located about a mile from Wilshire Boulevard Temple. So I used to go there as a kid. I used to go to Temple all the time as a kid and the Brea Tar Pits all the time as a kid on field trips with my family. It was just a thing that you do in LA growing up. So I always found it fascinating. I loved Indiana Jones as a kid. I would watch those on repeat on like Blu-ray or DVD or whatever it was. And so every time I'd go to the Brea Tar Pits, it would be like, this is a real Indiana Jones set. This is a real archaeological dig. This place is amazing. And this is super weird. So I had come up with a series of characters based around a small business and it going under and an immigrant Jewish family coming over to the U.S. who started this small computer and typewriter repair business, 3 generations, and it is now being put under because man is building the subway and kicking them out. And this is the end for them. And that was a story I wanted to tell. The grandfather in the movie is named Alfred. My grandfather was Rabbi Alfred Wolf. So there's a push and pull element, a familial element in it with the dad, played by Timothy Bottoms, and me, who plays the son, of push and pull of what to do with life, how to approach life, the different generations. So that's a big part of the film. And then I thought, all right, well, I want to do this. I want it to be something that's adventure, thriller, has some scares. I wouldn't call it your current horror movie because it's more throwback, which is what I like the most, is throwback adventure with some scares and actually builds the characters. And then I thought, well, let's make the Tar Pits a part of this. So it's the Tar Pits, which our office happened to be a block from the Brea Tar Pits at the time. So why not make it about the Tar Pits? So then it all kind of came together, like this story I wanted to tell about this last night and man getting kicked out, the small business getting destroyed by the man, if you will. And then the Brea Tar Pits, let's combine the two so that and make it a throwback, make it a movie that I want to see in this genre. Because I'm missing that these days. I'm missing the fun throwback, the movies from like the 90s and stuff that were a bit more fun adventure than just gore and terrifying, where you're a little bit, and you don't even know who the people are. It's just a lot of death and slasher and gore. That's not my kind of film. My kind of film is adventure, thriller, fun, and with some scares. So that's how it came about. And then it was the crazy process, like I've said a lot, about putting together an independent film with a bunch of actors, and we have couple Oscar nominees in the movie as well. So it's like how to put all of these pieces together to make this film come to life and to build a new world without $100 million budget, fraction of it. So that's how Tar came to life. And then there were a zillion crazy things that happened along the way, not one of which was just Tar, having that be a part of this movie, and it gets on you and it sticks to you and it's disgusting. That was I could make a movie just about that, excuse me, about how that was just a whole story unto itself of dealing with this tar everywhere all the time. And then making a fun adventure throwback movie that I want people to, it's 2020, we need distraction. So I want people to have a fun, distracting, good time and escape, and also feel a little bit of that throwback, that there are characters in this, that there is a story, that it's not just gore and slasher.
Totally. I love the idea that the story sort of came to you first, and you're having this location in mind, and then kind of marrying those two with some of those genre tropes that you were also already so interested in. I love that. So before my kind of final question, we will actually also add this to the show notes, but so with COVID, so I think you said the film is available online. Like I want to see it. I think our listeners will want to see it. How can they see it? Because I think you're absolutely right. This is like something that we're all kind of in need of.
Yeah. And it's escape. I emphasize that it's escapism and it's fun. Like, I wanted to make a fun movie. I'm a little bit, I don't know about you. What do you think, Sarah? Because I'm a little bit, and I'll answer your question, but I'm a little bit tired of the same old, like supernatural zombie killers slashing and you just see death the whole time, or like, I don't know, just that same kind of movie over and over again. I like things that are new and that aren't just like a miserable 2-hour experience.
No, I totally agree. Like horror comedies, throwbacks, as you said, something that's a little bit nostalgic. I mean, some of my favorites are, Army of Darkness or Gremlins, like something that kind of uses the genre, but also does have compelling characters, does have interesting stylistic elements, and isn't totally serious, doesn't take itself too seriously, doesn't, yeah. So I'm right there with you. Yeah.
You nailed like Gremlins, man. That's a fun movie. So, and in terms of the release, this goes back to your release question too. So in COVID, film release has totally changed. A lot of theaters are closed, as we know, different depending on the state. Some are open. There's been a drive-in surge, which has been really cool. So we've been playing at some theaters, and actually it changes and we grow at different points for about a month now. And now we're also available on demand online to watch on all the platforms, Apple, Amazon, Vudu, Google Play, you name it. We're available to watch or rent. You can rent it, you can buy it, you can watch it 20 times, whatever you want on demand. And we're also in theaters. So if you want to go have the theatrical experience, because all theaters have cut capacity, so it's like, I think 25%. And we're playing in Atlanta. We're playing at the Studio Movie Grill in Atlanta. And for listeners, we're playing around the country in select theaters. And then if you don't feel comfortable going to a theater, you can watch it at home. If you want to go to a theater and have that fun experience, because it is fun to see the movie in a theater, because it's got some jumps and fun and laughs and stuff. So then you can do that. Like we're in like Dallas and Florida and Atlanta and a lot of places like in theaters. And then if you don't, watch it at home and you just go to tarthemovie.com. So www.tarthemovie.com. Or you look up on Amazon Tar and it's there, or Apple or anything, and you can watch it there too. Or if you go to Tar the Movie, you can find if there's a theater near you if you want to go see it. Because the difference with now versus ever before is we wanted to make sure it was available to everyone. We didn't want to do the theatrical 3-month window when we don't even know what the country is going to be like in a week, let alone a month. And we wanted to make sure people could also have fun and watch it in the winter when there's not going to be a whole lot to do, just like there hasn't been a whole lot to do in 2020 in general. And we want people to be able to have fun. And you can watch it with your family, as long as the kids aren't like 5. You can have fun with your family and have a good fun ride. And the movie's about family. The core of it is about family coming together. So that's where you can watch it, how you can find it. And I'm really excited for people to keep seeing it, because I love the reactions I'm getting when people are writing and saying, man, I miss movies like this. So, and it's a whole new world, man. I want to go to the Brea Tar Pits. I want to see this place. So that all is really cool. And I hope I answered your question about how, because it's totally different, like the whole industry and everything changed. So that's why we're bringing it in all forms to you in every way possible so that you can watch it now.
That is great to hear because, yeah, I mean, I know I personally am still very much kind of sheltering in place. And so VOD has been my friend. Of course, I miss theaters. But, I hope people will just continue to engage with films like this in their homes safely or however they feel comfortable. Maybe make some popcorn, make a little home theater setup.
Yeah, it's cheap entertainment. It's cheap entertainment during a time when, things are a bit crazy. So it's like, why not have home movie night and with whatever movie you're going to watch. I hope it's this, but whatever movie you're going to watch, or if you want a different type of movie, Restoring Tomorrow's on Amazon. So that's the whole goal here, is to bring some fun and distraction, and let's have a good time in a time when we're looking for good times to have.
Absolutely. And I personally, I will encourage people to check out both Tar and Restoring Tomorrow, just because I think there's a purpose to both kinds of movie watching experiences during these times. And my closing question before I articulate it, I just want to say, like, I've been so enlightened by this conversation, because before I talked to you, I sort of again saw each of these films as being very different, but they really do fit together. And I'm so glad that you were able to kind of explain that, you don't see Tar as a departure. You don't see yourself as any one kind of filmmaker, but that these are all aspects of storytelling, and these are all sort of interrelated stories that you as a person want to tell. And I just think that that's really cool. So I'm glad I had this conversation with you, learn this from you, have our listeners be able to learn that And that does kind of lead me to my final question, which is just, and you know what, I'll kind of leave it somewhat open-ended for you. Just any specific examples or stories or anything that you didn't, maybe I didn't ask you directly about or that you want to talk about specifically though around, the walk, Restoring Tomorrow, and how essentially just how you have gotten to this new place in your career. Again, knowing that maybe this film isn't necessarily a departure, but I could almost see from some of the things you were saying that there has been maybe a little bit of an evolution again around the collaborative process. Obviously, film going and distribution is very different right now, as you also said. So just, yeah, how have those films, which AJFF was so lucky to be able to show and have this great relationship with you as a filmmaker, how did that all kind of get you where you are today? If you could, I don't know, just anything that comes to mind with that question, we would love to hear it and kind of end on that note.
Well, it's all, I mean, life's an evolution. And so creativity is an evolution. And getting better at your craft or learning more about your craft is an evolution. It's all a growing process. When I first came to AJFF with The Walk, which is a film I did with Peter Riegert, who's an awesome actor. He's, I think, a Emmy and Tony nominated actor. Or no, he's an Emmy. I don't know. He Oscar too. Anyway, so great to have him in that movie. And that was about my grandfather as well and a rabbi named David Wolpe's short story. So that, again, all these pieces keep evolving in just the craft of making film and learning how to do it better and learning how to utilize both the limitations that we have as an independent film production company and the more accessibility to things. So you have a little bit of both. Because when I brought that film there, it was like, man, I was just so excited to be bringing a movie with an actor who I think put on a great performance in the film. I'm also in it, but a smaller role. And just from that to now, it just feels like I'm just so grateful I get to keep creating. And all these films, if you've noticed, have Jewish characters in them, which is I'm proud of because that's who I am. I'm a Jewish character. So it's nice to be able to keep infusing that in the work I do. And then one other thing I'll say that's been interesting is filmmaking is all about problem solving and dealing with all the challenges that come your way, whether it was with The Walk, with Restoring Tomorrow, which we filmed over a couple years because of how the story played out, with Tar and the whole release. It's all about problem solving and constantly adjusting. And in this period of time, in 2020, as a small business, it's also been about adjusting because I'm not going to lie, things have been really hard. They've been really hard for everyone. And they've been really hard to sustain a small business and put out a movie at the same time with our partners with the movie. And so all of the struggles and trials and tribulations and then all the beautiful things like being in AJFF have all prepared, I think, me to at least handle in at least a somewhat sane way all the craziness that's gone on these last 6-7 months where you're struggling with every aspect of life, including sustaining a small production company, which so many are going under. And I'm feel very fortunate that we are not, as of now, knock on wood. So it's all a learning process and all a preparing you. That's not a word. Preparing you for what's next in the journey of life, the journey of creativity, and what things might be thrown my way and all our ways in putting little wrenches that we then have to figure out how to work around. Because today's another day of problem solving. So what are we going to do to keep on pushing through some of the most troubling and difficult times in our country's history and in my life, I know. So I'm just honored and grateful to be on this podcast, to be able to keep having a relationship with AJFF and to keep on this journey and to keep it going. And I thank everyone who supports independent film and our movies and Tar that's out now, because without you, we can't keep going. So I'm grateful. I'm constantly grateful for everyone who's given us a chance.
Well, we are likewise so grateful for your films and for you taking the time to chat today. Again, this was really great. It was a great conversation for me to be a part of. And we just thank you again so much for being on. And I think that was a perfect, I think hopeful note to end on, and I know our listeners will be excited to continue supporting films like yours and filmmakers like you. So thank you, Aaron. I think we will wrap it up there.
Well, thank you, Sarah. This has been a wonderful conversation, and we need good conversations these days. So I'm glad we got to have this.
As always, I'm Sara Glassberg. Producing and editing the show is our technical director, Chris Holland. My co-host is Brad Pilcher. The music you've been hearing throughout this episode is by the incredibly talented Joe Alterman. Please look him up wherever you get your music. Thank you again to today's very special guest, Aaron Wolf. You will find show notes, including the information on how to watch his latest film, Tar, and much more from us at ajff.org/inconversation. Our email address is inconversation@ajff.org. Drop us a question or a comment, and we might just include you on a future episode. Don't forget to subscribe in your podcast app of choice or check out our YouTube channel for new episodes. Give us a rating, a review. Every little bit helps. And last but certainly not least, we cannot continue to do this podcast or any of our other virtual programs without your support. If you are willing and able, please consider making a donation at ajff.org/inconversation. And of course, please tell your friends about the show. Until next time, goodbye.